Just north of Buffalo, upon the banks of the old Erie Canal, sits the great lumber city, North Tonawanda, New York. During the glory days of the Erie Canal, its harbor provided easy access to the Great Lakes. Quite convenient for the many lumber mills that sprang up along the town's docks. In fact, by 1890, it was one of the largest lumber ports in the country. And lots of the Midwestern wood that was transported down the canal ended up here at the Herschell Carrousel Factory, where it's almost post time. Every year, thousands of patrons make their way to the Herschell Carrousel Factory Museum.
We are the only carousel museum in the world built in the original factory. There are other factory museums and there's other carousel museums, but to have that unique combination of amusement and factory work all tied in together makes a really unique, fun experience.
Giddy up and giddy down. You'll find a stable of majestic thoroughbreds racing on the old #1 special carousel, beautifully restored to its 1916 luster. Yep, it's been a long, long run, a long way around.
Our understanding is Herschell sold over 3,000 carousels in his lifetime, and many companies only made 2 or 3 machines and they went out of business.
At the age of 18, Alan Herschell left his home in Scotland, settling with his parents and brother in North Tonawanda.
So in North Tonawanda, there were 4 separate companies that actually built carousels and amusement equipment. And it all starts with the Armitage Herschell Company. They made all of this steam-powered farming equipment, like this silage chopper, which would be sold to all kinds of local farmers and families within Niagara County and beyond. We're not far off. Metal gears with a flywheel from a steam engine. Alan is chronically ill. He actually has to go to New York City to find a doctor to take care of his specialty. And legend has it, while he's down there, he sees a machine made of wood, powered by steam, that adults are lining down the street to see. The Armitage Herschell Company would eventually move into carousels and other amusement with horses like these. They're actually part of steam riding galleries, which are not carousels as we know today, but they are actually machines that run more on a track. These horses don't go up and down. There's no pole hole for these. They actually kind of rock a little bit on these center posts from the center of the machine. You'll notice that they have up ears and are more rudimentary than the carousels that we know today. The Armitage Herschell Company was operating from about 1876 to 1901. And when George Armitage decides to retire, right at that turn of the century, Alan Herschell has to find someone else to partner with. And he joins up with the Spillmans, which includes his brother-in-law and his father-in-law. In 1904, they start making menagerie animals, which are just animals that aren't horses. This kind of brings in the golden age of carousels, competing with other companies to produce them throughout the US and this company operates until the early 1920s. The Spillman Engineering Corporation is actually just a name change of the Herschel Spillman Company, and that's because in 1913, Alan Herschel retires. He's chronically ill for his entire life, and he needs to retire to try to get better. So the company undergoes a name change in 1920 that they will use until they close in 1945. The early era of Spillman Engineering Corporation is that it's for adults. So looking at our logos and things like that, it's all for having adults riding these rides. In 1915, Alan Herschel wants to get back into the business, but he doesn't want to work with family anymore. So he actually purchases a new building, still in North Tonawanda, New York, and creates the Alan Herschell Carrousel Company, also known as the Alan Herschel Company legally. And they become well known for making amusement rides that are focused on travel. So these machines could go from place to place. They're smaller and they're able to be set up and taken down much faster than their opponents. And they're also one of the first to make animals out of other materials. So they have traditional horses such as this one, which is made of all wood.
By the late 1930s, the initial generation of wood carvers were aging out. And so Herschel started producing what became known as half horses, pieced together with aluminum heads and feet, but wooden bodies.
So these are made in the 30s and 40s, and then afterwards, they're going to be starting to make full aluminum horses starting in the 50s.
And the museum's collection also features one of these aluminum cast carousels, a kiddie ride for boys and girls, and colts and fillies alike.
So we start off with a U-shaped tool.
But with demonstrations and classes, volunteers like Douglas Bathke are keeping the legacy of the wood carvers very much alive.
Well, it's a true American art form, folk art. And there were carousels in Europe, but they didn't have the designs and the intricate patterns and stuff that we did.
A lot of the carvers for the company were of Germanic descent, of what we call today.
There was a movement in Prussia where most of these people were from, restricting their freedom of religion. And it interfered with their Lutheran church religion that was set up by the government in such a manner that if you don't go to the state schools, the state churches, you don't get any work permits for jobs. So there was a big migration in 1843, and most of those people settled in North Tonawanda, Burkholtz, Wheatfield, all the areas just north of here.
And they already had carving skills themselves. So a lot of these early carvers for the company were people that came from furniture making or music instruments, or they came from music, or they were making religious artifacts.
The animals themselves, they had apprentice or beginning carvers that did legs. They had to do 6 a day. They had the next level would have been like a journeyman. Those carvers were more skilled. They would do a body. They'd have to do a body and a half a day. And then the master carvers did the intricate head and mane design on the head and neck. And then they'd put all those parts together, glue them up, and then that would go off to the paint shop then for final sanding and finishing and then the painting. So by doing it in a production line process like that, they actually produced a horse and a half per man per day.
So what's really interesting with the modern day idea is that these carvers aren't considering themselves artists whatsoever.
This is Gerhard World. They called him Jake, and at this time he was 18 years old. He's carving a relief carving, which is the side of a chariot. Here's his tools and his mallet. You see he's got a couple different size mallets. Actually, we found one of Jake's pay stubs. It was 35 cents an hour. And he was one of the highest paid in the factory because of the skill level involved.
Not even really artisans in that sense. They consider themselves factory workers. This was a way to feed their families.
But Jake told me this gentleman, who wasn't carving in this photo, obviously, he was one of the fastest carvers the company had. If he got all those parts of the legs and the bodies, etc., from the other workers, his head and neck carving and then combining everything together, blending everything together, he could do 3 animals in one day.
However, their work is artistic.
These are master carvers because they're working on the heads and necks.
It is art in itself, but they wouldn't have considered themselves artists then. They were craftsmen doing a factory job. Even though that there was a pattern that dictated that you should be carving at these depths and these styles, it's all done by hand. So every single one has a slightly different detail, slightly different nuances that makes each horse unique. Herschell horses were known for having detail that wasn't necessarily difficult to replicate with paint or with other things because they had to move all the time, but the depth of the carving. And the differences and nuances of the saddles and their blankets specifically is what is really known for the carving characteristics of the Herschell companies. This is a Trojan war horse style horse from the Allen Herschell Company, and it's an excellent example of the 2 different sides of a carousel horse. So if you actually look at the outside that would be facing all of our guests, that would be known as the romance side. And this one in particular has beautiful detail with extra gold paint, with amazing gems, and this extra effort taken into the painting and the carving on that romance side. But taking a look at the inside, which would be seen by the operators and things like that, there's none of that extra detail, none of that extra work. It was too expensive there to do it on both sides. And when most people ride on a carousel horse, you look at the outside, you sit on top and look at the top, and you get off and just look at the outside again. A company joke was you could paint a horse 2 different colors and nobody would ever notice.
They had a side view, a close-up of the head and the jaw area, and a close-up of the front of the animal so you could get the muscular correct on the legs and chest there. That's all they had to go by. Everything else was just off the top of their head how they wanted to treat the animal.
After each horse was assembled, the carousels were tested in the roundhouse, then brought to the loading dock for shipping, where horse by horse, they were loaded into these boxes.
These boxes made sure that the animals could actually be stacked on top of each other inside of a train car.
Bound for carnivals, amusement parks, and county fairs.
They originally sent amusement rides to all 50 states, every province in Canada, and over 43 modern countries.
Set them up and break them down. And soon, the people would learn.
Once around is never enough.
Thanks to a donation by shoe manufacturer George F. Johnson, 6 of the carousels ended up here in Broome County, Binghamton, New York, now branded the carousel capital of the world.
I will say, for all of our good love for our friends in Binghamton, they couldn't be the carousel capital without North Tonawanda, the home of the carousel. So after World War II, a lot of the competitors of the Allen Herschell Company are going to start to fizzle out and have difficulty because carousels aren't as important to the modern person for amusement. How the Allen Herschell Company adapts is to create kiddie lands, which are children's focused ride areas that can either be put in a larger park or done separately. And they create a bunch of different rides that allow children to ride and experience.
They realized that they were losing generations of patrons as shopping malls developed around America in the late 50s and early 60s. Mom could go in shopping, Dad would take the kids to a kiddie land out in front, out by the parking lot, and they became very popular that way.
Because after World War II, we start having larger families, and we start focusing on things to do with our kids. So some of those rides you can see at the museum on display, and some of them you can even ride. One of our most famous that we have here is going to be our Little Dipper roller coaster. So it is a children's gravity coaster. So it doesn't need another motor, as it just goes up and then momentum has it go all the way around. This particular Little Dipper is from an amusement area that was well known in the Western New York community, and that was called Crystal Beach, located in Fort Erie, Ontario, Canada, directly across from Buffalo, and was a mainstay for generations of people to ride these rides. For the realm of North Tonawanda, which came first, the carousel or the music? It's the carousels, actually.
Allen Herschell desired music for his carousels, but shipping the equipment over from Europe was becoming far too expensive. So he convinced Eugene de Kleist to come over from Germany and build the musical apparatuses locally in North Tonawanda.
The North Tonawanda Musical Instrument Company is one of the many names that Eugene de Kleist uses for his companies here in North Tonawanda. He eventually sells his production stuff to the Rudolf Wurlitzer Company.
The museum's holdings include an extensive collection of musical instruments produced by the nearby Wurlitzer Company and its predecessors.
How band organs function is they're actually all based on pressure, on pneumatics, which is an air-based system. They're really an amazing, complex machine for people to learn about and see. So Artisan was made by a few Wurlitzer employees who didn't want to work for Wurlitzer anymore. So they set up their own band organ company in North Tonawanda. The organ that we have has over 200 pipes in it.
The museum has over 3,000 music rolls in their collection, and from these masters, they're able to create copies on the original equipment.
So the difference between a roll that was made in 1916 and one that the museum can make today is who pushed the button.
So we have a brass reading bar here with little square holes cut into it. Each square hole is cut to a rubber tube that goes to a pipe. So as the open cut goes over that hole, air pressure changes and a vacuum switch allows air to go into the pipe to play the note. In 1945, this factory bought out the Spillman Engineering Corporation across town, and they tried to work out of that building, this building.
But working between the various production facilities became unmanageable.
So they ended up leaving here in 1959 and went into Buffalo to one big large building that could handle all their production. And then in 1970, Chance Rides of Kansas bought out the company and took everything, all the product, all the machinery and stuff that they needed to Kansas.
And finally, the long, long run was over. The old factory building became run down, heading for an appointment with the wrecking ball, becoming an overstuffed junkyard for an auto repair business.
So the guy really wasn't taking care of the building at the time. If there was a leak, he ran a piece of gutter that the roof could leak onto and ran that out a window.
And so it was up to the citizens of the Tonawandas to save the factory. But restoration takes money. That's when the Carousel Society of the Niagara Frontier launched a campaign to restore the building and purchase a carousel. The people went door to door, block to block, dollar to dollar. Eventually, the money was raised.
And the public was very generous. They got any donation, they received a ticket for a free ride once that ride, wherever it may be, was set up.
And then things collapsed when the old roundhouse was crushed by a snowstorm. But still, they persisted.
And we were able to find 2 rides available at that time. And the one we were able to purchase or concentrated on was what we think may have been the first ride out of this factory.
And that brought the old #1 special back home to North Tonawanda. However, there were problems. In an effort to restore the carousel, the previous owner had used the wrong kind of paint.
We didn't have it 6 months and it was cracking and breaking up all over. We learned from a restoration expert how to repair those, and it wasn't until 2 years ago that we finally completed the 36 animal that's on the machine, and now they're all restored to look like they came out of the factory.
In the 1980s, the United States government labels Americana carousel animals as folk art. The different artists, the different carvers, as they would call themselves, would be able to create these pieces that, even if they're using a pattern, would be unique due to their hand for each individual one. So it's very important to preserve and take care of carousels and historical amusement in general. American amusement is a really good way to notice the cultural stepping stones of our past. So looking at these pieces of equipment, you can see our former agrarian lifestyle or what other things were happening during that time period in which they were made. It's really a looking glass into the past with all of this amusement equipment.
Yes, it's been a long, long run and a long way around.